Hi, Jess.
Hey, Catt, what's up?
Good to see you. Thanks for being open to chatting with me today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, happy to have you. So, for people who don't know, Jess and I used to work together at Etsy about 10 years ago. I think I met you, which is so
That's
weird.
a long time ago.
So strange to think, yeah, 10 years ago, I got to watch you build out Etsy's design system and transition from senior to staff. And basically, you were my mentor for a while, which was really fun. And yeah, I've mentioned in the book as well, this friend here, which I will be referring to sometimes, that you are like one of the major inspirations for, or you were one of the major inspirations for me in terms of going down that path. So I'm happy that I could put you in the book so prominently. And also, I'm really grateful that you have decided to join today. So, for people who maybe read the book or maybe didn't, catch us up. Who are you at this moment? What have you been up to? And maybe what's shifted for you since last year?
Oh boy. Who am I? I'm Jessica Harlee. I'm a staff product designer at Shopify. I'm working on Shopify's retail point of sale system. So like brick and mortar merchants. So I work on the tools that merchants selling on Shopify use to manage, setup, and configure their retail point of sale business. So a lot of people who sell on Shopify sell across different channels. And so I'm focused on merchants who are selling at stores, which is great because I get to go to Soho and see a bunch of people and do research.
It's so fun. I still remember, I think it was last year, I happened to go to a stationery store that just opened and they used
Yeah.
Shopify and I was like, they were struggling and I said, I know a person who can help with
And I
this.
was
And
like
like,
texting,
yeah, we were just texting back and forth. Oh my God, what is
tell
going
them to do
on? Like,
this.
why is it
Yeah.
not working? It was so, yeah, she was really grateful. So yeah, thanks for for
Yeah.
all that you do, all the quote unquote research that you do. It is helpful though. I think being able to see,
See it in the
in
wild.
the wild, yeah, that's really
Yeah.
valuable. And we need more practitioners who go to that length. There's a lot of talk about, oh, should the job stop at outside of the hours of 9 to 5, et cetera, which I respect, but also I think for our type of work, it is very service design related. So that's
Totally.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel I'm always kind of able to keep an eye out on what are the businesses around me doing. When I go shopping, which is often, I can see, oh, what devices are they using? Like, how are they interacting between different people in the store and like all that kind of stuff. So that's super fun. I think something that I'm really liking about working on retail is just the IRL component of it. There's something just super tangible about it, but you still get to use tech to solve problems. So that's been really cool. I've been at Shopify for 2 years now. I just hit my 2 year
Wow.
anniversary. And I remember when we were last talking, I think I had just started at
Yeah.
Shopify. And so one interesting thing that's happened since then was I joined Shopify on the growth team and I was working on retail, but retail growth. And so one change that I did make was about a year ago, I switched from working on retail growth to just retail and working more on the feature set versus merchant onboarding and activation. Yeah, happy to talk about switching teams and making that decision and all of that. But I
Yeah.
think one thing that's been really nice about working at a bigger company, Shopify is the biggest company I've ever worked at, is the mobility that you're afforded to just try different things while staying at the same company. So that's been really interesting.
That's awesome. I am definitely curious because I have, in addition to the book, I run a course and I've also had some coaching clients who have asked about what it's like to switch teams and like when you might know that it might be time or what that experience is like. So if you feel comfortable, as much as you feel comfortable sharing, I would love to hear.
I joined Shopify's growth team and I had never worked explicitly on a growth team before. There are roles called growth design at some companies. And I had done a lot of stuff in the past at Etsy, actually. Etsy was like really big on experimentation and
True.
making decisions based on experimentation outcomes and experimentation driven design and like all of that. And that part of the job wasn't super new to me. And also setting the vision and iterating your way toward that through experiments. And so I thought that would be like an interesting change of pace to go just right into a role that was like super focused on that. And then the retail aspect of it was like also just super interesting because I've always just wanted to work on retail products. It's always just been really interesting to me. And I grew up working in a retail environment too. Like my mom was a retail store manager for 20 years and I worked the cash register at the store that she worked at for a long time. There's always just been an interest there. So I thought this was a company I always wanted to work at, a role that was stretchy for me and on a product that I found really interesting. So I worked in growth for about a year. And there were some things about it that I really loved and some things that I was struggling with a little bit. I think in a growth role, typically things can shift really fast based on just whatever the business needs, which I think some people can find really interesting and exhilarating. And I did find it interesting, but I also found I had typically worked on more feature teams. And so you iterate on a feature over and over or a product area, and then you can improve it over time. And that wasn't always the case in a growth role. And I don't know, I thought that I was learning a lot in growth, but I learned a lot about the business. I learned a lot about the different cross-functional roles within Shopify, like working with sales, working with revenue, working with support. And that was really interesting. But I think when I was thinking about the type of work that I wanted to be doing and the things, not just that I was good at, but that really just the things that I wanted to be spending my time doing.
Yeah.
I think it was more in the owning a feature, owning a product, and working more on workflows and stuff like that, which wasn't as much what growth was doing. And so what I did, I think one of the things that I mentioned, to tie it back, one of the things I mentioned in the interview with you was just the importance of networking and relationships and building up your relationships.
Yeah.
And I had some relationships from Etsy and just that I had built at the company on other teams. And so I started putting feelers out. It was like moving to another team is like internally interviewing. It is
So
an
real.
interview process. Yeah. Like, so you're like job hunting basically. And so I started putting feelers out on other teams and saying, hey, I think I'm ready to switch to another role that feels like a better fit for my skill set and for my interests and the things I want to be developing. And I reached out to Jason Huff, who we worked with at Etsy, who was leading design on retail, the design director of Shopify's retail. And he had an open role and we had talked. We had a couple of conversations and then we went through the formal interview process. And at Shopify, there is a formal process where you have to be in good standing. You have to alert your manager. You have to alert the manager of the team that you want to move on to. And then there's an interview process. And so it is a pretty formal process, but it is also because it's internal and you've been vetted up to a certain point. It is definitely, you don't have to start from nothing, which is great.
Yeah.
So I went through the process and I got the role. And then I worked with my manager to schedule a proper transition period and time to hand off what I was working on. And then I joined a new team and had to re-onboard. So it was really interesting, but I'm really glad that I did it. I think it was tough to know if I was doing the right thing sometimes because it can be hard to put yourself in a position where you're destabilizing things.
Yeah.
Especially just these days, I feel like everything is a little destabilized feeling, but in the end, I think it really paid off and I'm really happy on this team and I'm doing work that I'm like really excited about.
Oh, that's good to hear that it's more aligned with your areas of interest and maybe your quote unquote zone of genius. And that's something I've always felt like you're very good at, which is identifying what you're strong at and figuring out like, okay, what's not fitting and how do I move myself towards something that maybe fits a bit more. And that is something that I wanted to talk about. So in the staff designer book, I introduced the idea that different staff designers have different strengths and there's different archetypes. So some people are maybe more strong at systems design. And so those might be architects, quote unquote. Then you have people who maybe are intrinsically driven by aesthetics and are leaning more into visual and interaction design. And those people might be tastemakers. There are people who are really good at storytelling and pitching, and those people maybe are visionaries. And then you've got people who are just naturally very interested in creating design systems and guidelines and things of that nature, like documentation driven kinds of people who maybe are more platformy. What archetype, if the reaction there, people are always asking, how do I find my archetype? So I'm curious, what archetype or archetypes do you strongly identify with and how did you figure that out?
Yeah, I think as you were reading that, like the one that definitely made my brain go like that was, I think it was the architect. You said like the systems thinking.
Yeah, I figured.
I know. Yeah. I guess the brand is strong.
Yeah, that's why I felt also, I was like, oh, there maybe is a path for me in design long term, because if she can succeed, then so can I. I feel like our brains work very similarly. And yeah, like I think there's a lot of value in a person who is maybe a bit more service and systems design oriented, even though it's maybe you're an incredible visual designer also. You do a
Thank
great job
you.
of balancing both, but I think very often you find that people who are maybe driven more by systems design they maybe sometimes get negged a little bit for their like visual design skills or what they tend to prioritize, and they maybe start to feel they like internalize it a little bit and say, oh, maybe I'm not meant or for design or cut out for design work. And I think you've done a really good job of leaning into what you're strong at and just saying, nope, this is who I am.
Thank you. I feel like I have an appreciation for all of that. And I guess one way I think about it is like there are people who are way better at that than I am. And that's totally fine. And
Yeah.
that's great. And in a decently set up system, I feel like I can work my way around it. I can find ways to improve it. I can help spot things that are not working. But when I think about the things that really get me excited and that really tickle my brain or scratch that itch or whatever you want to say, I think it is definitely thinking on a systems level, thinking about like, how does everything work together? How does it stitch together? Where do the seams meet and how does that feel? And it's not like it's not visual design or vision exercises and all of that thinking, because I do think systems does touch on all of that.
Sure.
But I think it's like the underlying framework that helps you make decisions and helps things feel simple or complicated or helps people understand. I don't know, like how does it all work? And that stuff I think is really exciting to me.
That makes sense. So it sounds like over time you realized that the problems that you were more drawn to were those kinds of what does it all mean and how does it all connect
Yeah. Yeah.
problems.
Like where are you spending your free time, or where are you finding yourself digging a little deeper, doing the extra mile on a project, right? Where on a project, maybe you're trying to sneak in a couple of extra changes just because while you're there, leaving things in a better place. I think it's like, what are the kinds of things that you are excited by fixing or making better? There's definitely going to be elements of design systems and visual design that make me really excited and happy to leave better. But I also think it's like, oh, can we just delete this thing? It's redundant with something else. Or it's unclear here what the hierarchy is or what I should be doing, or it doesn't feel right. Or there's things like that that I think I definitely find myself attracted to and spending my free time thinking about. And to me, that's a signal that those are the things that really excite me and that I'm drawn to.
I am curious what you've noticed since you joined Shopify specifically. Like, how has your sense of your own archetype potentially changed? Do you feel like it's grounded you even further, or how do you adapt if necessary if they are asking for something that maybe isn't quote unquote naturally your strong suit, but you still need to show up in that way?
Yeah, I think working at Shopify has been really good for my inner architect because in my mind, I think Shopify does the architect stuff really well. At every other company that I've worked at, I've always looked at Shopify as they have figured out like how to make a really complex product feel really simple, how to make a product work for businesses of all sizes, businesses who are one person, businesses who are like publicly traded companies, like all are using the same architecture. And I find that just so interesting. And that's one of the reasons that I always wanted to work at Shopify, honestly, was because just the systems thinking there is just really incredible. And so I feel like for me, it's been really energizing because a lot of the people who work there are also architects. And so I feel like I get to learn from people who are really good at and interested in the things that also excite me. And I think also the scale of Shopify, like the number of people, the size of the business, all of that has been really helpful for just learning a scale that I've never operated at before and had to figure out.
It sounds like it's that, okay, I'm surrounded by people who identify it as this, and this is a valued skill set here, which is
It
great.
is. Yeah, it's definitely a valued skill set. And I think there's also been a lot of really excellent hires recently too, who are like really spiking in the visual craft and design systems and the future thinking stuff. And so I do think that there's also a lot of people that I'm able to either work with or learn from who are really good at things that I'm maybe not as good at. And so I think that balance has just been really good. I think like being able, like approaching it with a learning mindset and just being like, I'm not going to be intimidated by these people. I'm going to just try to learn as much as possible from people who are good at things that maybe are harder for me. And so I think they've been doing a good job of making sure that there's a mix of people who are like really strong at all these different archetypes.
Love that. Definitely a note to anybody who manages teams. Please don't expect everybody to fit exactly the same mold and rather hire complementary skill sets, so that
Especially the
people
more
can
senior
learn.
you get, right?
Yeah.
I think the more senior you get, the more I think you start to find your groove in specific areas and these specific archetypes. And yeah, I don't think you can expect somebody to be amazing at everything. There are people who are really good at a lot of things, but I think thinking about hiring as a team and not individuals, it's like thinking about how people balance each other out and work together. Like I often have been paired up on projects with people who are a level above me or have skills who complement mine. And I think you are able to get into these flow states together where your work really gels.
I imagine that you both improve really quickly because you both get to do something that you're really good at and inspire each other almost. And that was something I was also curious about because also in the course, like people, when they hear, okay, sometimes you're going to have to be put on projects that just maybe don't showcase your strength and you have to figure out what to do in those situations. I think in the past, we've talked about how you've had to sometimes shift from like maybe doing more architectural work to thinking about more design systemsy, like technical craft work, and then strategy visioning, like longer term thinking, because that's just necessary. You just needed to operate in those different kinds of ways. And one thing that course participants often are nervous about and are reporting is just that they feel like they're expected to be everything. So I'm curious, how do you handle those situations where, okay, maybe this isn't in your zone of genius, but you do have to put on that hat for a little bit? How do you think about that transition? What do you tell yourself in those moments? How do you treat yourself?
I think like earlier in my career when I would get put on projects where maybe it wasn't in my mind the best skill set match, or it was like a topic that I was less interested in or anything like that. I think my more immature instincts would be to just be really grumpy about it,
Relatable.
which happened and doesn't usually go over very well. I think what I've learned is that there's something you can learn from every project that you're working on. And I think it's like, how do you challenge yourself to take something away from the project? And how do you challenge yourself to find something interesting about it, something that you can learn from it? Like, how can you use this to improve a specific skill set or a specific tool that you maybe are less comfortable in? How can you use it to maybe round out your next performance review and say, look, I did this thing that is maybe outside of my comfort zone or something that I don't normally do or is really high profile. And there's going to be something that you get out of every situation. And I think focusing on what's the goal, what's my personal goal for this, and what am I trying to get out of this? And then how can I use that in my next performance review or the next project or whatever it is to show how I've learned or bettered myself or picked up new skills or whatever it is. I think that way of thinking can help get through something where maybe you're not super jazzed about it or it's not tickling your brain in the same way that other projects do.
That makes a lot of sense. I've had times where I've had to tell myself, this is it's going to be like a chapter in my presentation. It's a story of how I can stretch
Yep.
myself, and I can still, there's also, you can find, okay, how can I hijack this part of my brain that normally is excited by this other thing? Is there a
Yes.
way to find that in here somewhere? No.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think some examples might be like, is there the part of the business that I've never worked on before that now I get to learn about? And this happened to me at Etsy. I had always worked on seller facing things. And I was put on a project where there was a buyer facing component. And I was like, oh, I don't do that. And then that was my initial hot take reaction, which is not helpful and not mature. And then eventually I was like, I'm in this situation. I can't change it. It is what it is. Everything ends. So, what can I get out of this? And I ended up learning a lot about the buyer facing experience. I ended up being one of the few designers who actually had buyer facing and seller facing experience. And then that helped in future projects because I had this perspective that not a lot of people had the opportunity to gain. And so I think it's just a reframing exercise. And then I was able to put on a performance review, like self-reflection or whatever. I did this, I learned this, and that can be really big.
Thanks for sharing. You had mentioned before when you had switched roles, like part of it was just understanding, okay, what drives me? What am I interested in? And we just covered some of that in terms of switching teams, rather. But then you also mentioned relationship building and the importance of that work. So, I think it was chapter 4, one of the big things that I ended up quoting you for was the importance of, yeah, building relationships. And so you mentioned like it's better to ask a lot of questions, maybe to feel a bit annoying, especially if you're new to a company. And I feel like you're just so good at that. So you were talking about that in the context of starting at a new company. You did mention that you've had some longer term collaborative relationships that continue to be valuable over time. And I'm curious, like, how you maintain those relationships over time, how you do that in a genuine fashion, also, because that's something I get a lot of questions about. Have, how do I network in a way that's genuine and like maintain relationships without it just feeling transactional?
Oh my God. Yeah, I feel like it's something I really have to force myself to do. I'm such an introvert. I'm like really bad at reaching out to people. I love being alone and by myself. That is not, that's my natural instinct is to just, I don't know, not reach out to people, which is really bad. I think that it has to come from a genuine place. I feel like when people are reaching out to you and it's not from a genuine place, you can tell it. And it doesn't feel good. And it doesn't feel good being on the receiving end of that. And it doesn't feel good doing it either.
Yeah.
I feel like when people need something from you, doing something for them, right? Like doing favors for other people, helping them out, then makes it easier the next time you need to then go ask for help from them. One example is if you work somewhere and somebody that you know is looking for a job, they need you to maybe bump their resume or submit something for them on their behalf. I'm often happy to do that if I have a real relationship with that person. And then that makes it easier then later on, maybe if I need them to help me with something, to ask the favor of them, right? Like, sure, maybe you can have a transactional request of people, but are you engaging with them as a human being? Asking like how they're doing, saying, what have you been up to since I saw you last? Or just genuinely being interested in them and how they're doing.
I agree. Obviously, there is a professional layer to a lot of this,
Everything. Yeah.
but at the same time, treating people like people, I think, is important. And yeah, at least in my experience, a lot of folks have been happy to help each other. But it's maybe about like, okay, are you only coming to me when you need help,
Right.
or are you checking in on me occasionally just to see how I'm doing?
And
Yeah.
sometimes if it's transactional, but don't expect more than that, right? But I think I've also been able to make genuine friendships out of professional relationships like this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
have loved July 4th hangs.
yeah,
I
Coney
still have the
Island.
bean hat. I still have a
I do
hat
too.
with beans on it. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Smurf sunglasses.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, I still have those. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
And you can't force that. It's like, who do you want to surround yourself with? Who's like a genuine person? And then also, maybe when there are professional opportunities, you think of them. But I don't know. I find it hard to force the professional stuff if the personal stuff isn't there too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Do you gel with the person or not? And then if you do, then that's cool because that means that you can tolerate being around them for like 8 hours a day, which is great
Yeah,
because if
totally.
you're
Do you
gonna
want
work
to
with them, yeah.
you want to surround yourself with people that you want to spend time with?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you need to be
Surprise.
best friends, but they need to be like nice, genuine human beings,
Yeah, I agree
ideally.
with that. Yeah, it's so funny. Sometimes I, again, talk to like a coaching client or something, for example, and they're just like, okay, but I'm scared to ask for stuff, or I don't know, like I don't want them to think that I'm just talking to them because I want to get in their good graces. And it's like, yeah, but you kind of do want to do
Yeah.
that. And that's maybe okay if you think that they're cool. It's fine to just be like,
Yeah.
hey, I think you're cool. And I want to talk once every month or once every 3 months. It's better to try and see how it feels. And if it doesn't, if y'all don't gel, that's fine. I have certainly canceled or done something, shifted something ad hoc if it just wasn't working, and that's okay. But it's better to give it a go.
I think it's also true when thinking about relationships internally at a company too. I think you don't need to be best friends with everyone that you work with, but I do think you need to understand them as human beings and have a human relationship with them as well beyond just purely the meeting personas.
Yeah.
Especially because, I work at a fully remote company. We don't see each other in person all the time. And so you don't get as much of the chatter that you do when you are in the office with somebody. And so I think there are people who I need to have relationships with at work. And, I try to DM people and send them something funny or make a comment and send them a funny emoji or have a coffee chat every couple of weeks to just build up the relationship. And it's sure, maybe there is some transactional element of that because in the end, we are coworkers doing things to have a job together and like
Capitalism.
build projects and products together. But I think by asking somebody how their kids are, how their weekend was, or I don't know, that kind of stuff makes it easier than to go and say, okay, now we're in this really difficult project situation, but I have a strong enough foundation with you that I know we can work through this together.
I think the other layer that's nice is I don't know about you, but sometimes if I don't have that stuff, then I start to feel like I'm work larping way too much and nothing makes sense and it's all like
Yes.
meaningless,
Yes.
And the more I actually talk to people and learn about their hobbies and their family and what they do in their spare time and just, yeah, what they've been thinking about recently, then I'm like, okay, I work with people. These people are really nice and interesting. And this does
Yes.
mean something, maybe.
Something that I try to do too is just not be so serious all the time. I think it's like there's obviously an element of seriousness, especially in a senior role that you need to bring to the job. But I also think I try to do my best to remind people that I'm a human being and I'm doing my best. And I don't know, not have such a hard shell all the time. I have to force myself to do that sometimes, again, because I'm very introverted and trying to protect myself or whatever it is. But I have found that an element of vulnerability can go a long way to also help other people break out of their work shells a little bit and be like, okay, we're just two people. We're just two people talking. It's not that serious.
That's so real. Yeah, you have always been such a great digital yapper. I've always loved
I
your
am.
emoji game and
Thank
like
you.
your poster fire like all the time.
I'm not a real life
Use that.
yapper, but in the Zoom chat, I'm always saying something.
You're killing it. You kill it in a Zoom chat. You
Thank
kill it in
you.
Slack. It's
It's
I
important.
do miss that.
There is a very important role that some people have to play, which is the yapper in the Zoom chat or the Slack emoji replier. It breaks the ice, and I don't know. That's me.
Yeah, I also identify with all of that, and I definitely miss working with you for that reason. Yeah, I'm so jealous of everybody who gets to work with you because they're getting such good Slack emoji reactions. Oh, okay. So question, say that a designer has been working at a company for a couple of years. They realize, oh crap, like I don't people don't really know me. Leadership doesn't really know who I am. And I want to make an effort to start connecting with the director of design that I report to, for example. What would you recommend to that person in terms of how they can start investing more into their working relationships, even though they are late to the game?
Oh man, it's so terrifying to put yourself out there like that, especially I think upwards. I think I don't know, I find it scary. And for me, I have to really force myself to do it. It just doesn't come naturally. I think in the past when I've done that, I think it's typically usually started with talking to my manager about it. I think if you feel comfortable talking to your manager about that being a goal of yours, they're in a really great position to help because they have relationships across the company, they have relationships upwards, and I think they are going to be probably excited by the fact that this is a skill that you want to build. This is the thing you want to do, is have more visibility, have stronger connections with leadership. I think any manager would be happy to hear that. And in the past, I've started with talking to my manager about it, and then you can strategize together. You're not just doing this on your own, but you can work together and say, okay, who do I need to build a relationship with? Who would be really beneficial to have that relationship with? Is it my manager's manager? Is it a manager on another team that I need to build a relationship with because we're working together all the time? Is it maybe practicing my presentation skills and my storytelling skills and getting in front of leadership, or practicing defending my work? This is all stuff that's solid manager territory, in my opinion. And I think strategizing with your manager about this is a good place to start. And then you can say, okay, what's the most important tangible goal for me to work on? And what are the things I can do to actually make that possible? I think the other thing is, and this is, I think, true of any coffee chat, have an outcome that you're looking for and have a specific goal in mind or a question you're trying to answer, because I think that makes it easier for the person you're asking something from to know how to help you, because otherwise it's just going to be like, they're not going to know how to help you unless you come to them with something that's like, this is a question I'm trying to answer. This is a skill I'm trying to improve, whatever it is. And so if you schedule a random get to know you chat with somebody above you, have specific things in mind that you want to learn from them and talk to them about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love the idea of working with your manager to figure out a good tactic for approaching the situation. And I think that was something that you'd also mentioned previously is good for other situations as well. You had recommended aligning with your manager and design leadership on areas that you and the team might want to push on in the future in general.
Yes.
How has the current landscape of tech and design affected how you and potentially, in terms of coordinating with leadership, like how you're thinking about what to push on? Before, maybe it was more about we got to ship quickly at the expense of craft. I'm curious, like where things have landed for you more recently and how you think about operating that way.
Yeah.
This was like my light segue into everyone's favorite phrase, which is AI. Basically, AI is pretty much like where people are supposing that AI is reshaping what design work looks like. And some people have massively changed the way that they operate. So I'm curious how you're adapting to it, how that might be changing the conversations that you're having with design leadership, for example, how you're thinking about your role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think It's been really interesting. I think one thing that I have noticed is I feel like on some level we're back to the designers who code era where there's an edge on some level to designers who are comfortable with embracing tools, blurring the lines between disciplines, especially engineering. There's an expectation that your job doesn't just stop with a prototype or a mock-up, but you're also responsible for the quality of the work that ships, which I think has always been true. But I think now that we have a lot of AI tools to help with that, I think designers are in a better position than maybe 10 years ago to actually like ship code on production. Like a lot of my job these days is not just making really sick prototypes or whatever, but also logging in to Shopify.com and like, what are merchants seeing and what's out there and what am I able to fix? If I see something in production that's not right, the expectation now is that I'm doing something about it and not just filing a bug, but maybe even fixing it myself, which I think for me as somebody who's always pushed code as part of my role, I think has always been true and exciting for me. I think just the tools have shifted now, and it's like maybe the barrier to entry is a little lower. And so what we're talking a lot about right now is not just, it's definitely craft skills and it's all those details, but I also think it's the quality bar isn't just about the artifacts that you're producing, but what's actually live in the app on the site, which I love because that's the thing. The prototype isn't the thing. That's not the end goal. The end goal is the thing that your customers are experiencing. And so I think having more ownership over that is a good thing in the end.
Right now, a lot of the tooling comes a bit later in the process, would you say, closer to execution?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's probably spikes where I'm using a lot of AI tooling right now in the process. One is earlier on where I'm like building prototypes, like HTML prototypes, basically to demonstrate or even think through the kinds of things that we want to be building. And then I'm using those prototypes to then have design reviews and walk people through in leadership and on other teams. Hey, this is what we're thinking about. And then you have a really high fidelity experience to then get buy-in on what you're trying to do. And then later on in the process, when engineering has been building things and we're like actually shipping stuff, then I'm using AI tools a lot later and I'm like using it to fix design bugs that I see and actually shipping those bug updates or copy updates or whatever it is myself to the project. And so it's like early on and then later on right before it ships.
That's great. When you're working on some of those early prototypes, I'm curious how you keep the focus, especially with leadership, on the concept rather than the execution.
I think a downside of really high fidelity prototypes has always been that you're going to get feedback on everything, especially the really high fidelity details. And so, yeah, I feel like it's been something that I've learned with AI tooling is for building prototypes. Sometimes it's just not there. The design details are like, if you squint your eyes, it kind of looks like production, but not always. And sometimes I've just been like, oh, it's fine. Well, it's just a prototype. It doesn't matter. But then you show it to somebody and they're like, wait, is this literally what you're proposing? And I'm like, no, it's just a prototype. There is a level of polish that is necessary for a really high fidelity prototype, or else it's just distracting when you see type that's a pixel off or whatever it is. You have to control the conversation around what you're showing. Like if you're trying to get feedback on really high level directions. Don't show a huge open-ended high fidelity prototype, right? Show a piece of the flow or show a screen or whatever it is, or even abstract it out beyond that and be like, are we aligned on these principles or whatever it is, right? And then later on, if you're trying to get feedback on how the flow integrates into the existing experience or what it's like to actually go through the process and all those details, that's when a high fidelity prototype is going to make sense. And again, I think this has always been true of the design process, but I think AI is making it faster and cheaper to get there. You can't forget all of these fundamentals of showing work, getting approval, moving projects forward, all of that.
Yeah, that's so real, especially at a really large company. You have to align stakeholders and you have to continue to think about the right artifacts. I think maybe at smaller companies, that's something that people don't have to do as much. And so it's a bit easier to say, okay, yeah, let's just build it. But yeah, if you have to present to a variety of stakeholders and explain your thinking in more detail, then yeah, sometimes the prototype can be distracting. And so I love your point of trying to figure out what other artifacts might be more useful for communicating the point. Thank you.
Something that I have noticed too, just to add on, is like, at least at my company, I don't know if this is true, but I feel like lo-fi artifacts aren't really flying anymore. I feel like there was a while when it was like everyone was wireframing or literally sketching or whatever it might be, and showing something lo-fi as a way to control the feedback. And I think that because it's so easy and fast to get really high fidelity prototypes and mockups now, it's just not the case anymore that people can show or expect to see wireframes. And so I think then it's more about, if I am showing something that's higher fidelity, what are the right things to focus on? Or how do I draw attention to the things that I need feedback on and fade into the background the other things?
That's so smart. Thanks for sharing. I know that we need to wrap. So I'm curious, what is keeping you in design right now?
I still am loving it. I'm still loving solving problems for people. And I think that's always been motivating for me. I think I'm still learning. I'm still learning from people who are really smart and really talented. I'm getting to build things that I've never been able to build or try before. And I'm working on things that impact actual people and their businesses and livelihoods. And for me, those are the things that have always been really motivating for me. And I think it's just a matter, for me, it's a matter of understanding what motivates me and then doing everything I can to put myself in that position where I'm excited by the work and who I get to do it with.
I love that. And yeah, that's great advice for people who are trying to operate at this level. Know thyself
Yeah.
well. Just get to know yourself as much as
Yes.
you can. Thanks, Jess. And where can people find you on the internet?
Great question. You can find me at jessicaharlee.com, which I have not updated in a while.
Still great blog posts, though,
Thank you. I don't,
and great
where am
design.
I on the
Yeah.
internet? I'm like laying low these days, but you can find me on my website.
Heck yeah. Yeah. I love the fact that you own your personal presence on the internet to that degree. I think everyone should have their own corner of the internet that they can say is theirs, and yours is so fun.
Thank you. Been doing that since I was like 13 years old. So
Heck
gotta
yeah.
keep it up.
Gotta keep it up. Awesome. Thank you so
Thank you,
much for
Catt.
taking the time.
Thank you for
And
having me.
yeah, go to Jess's website, please. All right.
See you later.